Aaron Farrell from Portland, and Julie's, I think, in her car, probably going to join us live when she gets to her desk. But we're really excited this morning to do our program on what we wish we knew about EVs before we purchased one. So we have some EV owners lined up to share some of their experiences. We have some questions that we have a few questions we're going to ask to kind of prime the conversation, but this is definitely intended for an opportunity for people in the community to ask questions of their fellow community members about their experience. And we have Will Shabbat from the Center for Transportation and the Environment, who can answer maybe just some technical questions about EVs if any come up. And we also have Hogan from Efficiency Maine on hand, who can answer questions about incentives for EV drivers. And so actually, before we get started, I just want to pass it over to Hogan briefly to make an announcement. Efficiency Maine has some good news for EV drivers in Maine, and I want to give Hogan a moment to talk about what that means for us.
Yes, we have very good news. Thank you, Troy. And good morning, everyone. Hogan Dwyer, I'm a program assistant on the electric vehicles team at Efficiency Maine. And so we just recently heard back from the federal government about an application we sent in last year for the CFI program, which is Charging and Fueling Infrastructure. So this is a national program to build out EV charging and other alternative fuel vehicle charge infrastructure. And Maine was awarded the full request of $15 million to put towards our Recharge Maine project, which is our joint effort with the Maine Department of Transportation to build out EV charging in the state. So we got the full amount, which includes kind of two prongs. We applied for money to build out our alternative fuel corridors, which are the biggest corridors in the state for travel. So we will put that money towards fast chargers along major roads and highways. And then we also received money to put towards our community program, which will include some of those fast chargers, particularly for cities with multi-unit dwellings where people need close by fast charging to own an EV and make it work, as well as lots and lots of level 2 chargers. So you might know that we've had many solicitations and grant opportunities in the past for level 2s. We haven't had any the past few months, but we now have this new pool of money that we'll be able to build lots of new programs to support chargers around municipal buildings, libraries. We're focusing on, again, on disadvantaged communities and what we're calling rural service centers or regional service centers. So those cities and towns in the state that our rural populations rely on to get the services they need. So very exciting news, and more information on that to come.
Yeah, no, we were very excited to hear the news. The city of Portland was a supporter of the application because we saw it align really well with the goals that we also share with Efficiency Maine and MDOT around EV charging. So I think it's going to be a great plus for our community neighborhood charging hubs idea that really is designed to support charging in neighborhoods with lots of multifamily units. So now, with that good news, I think we can jump into our first round of Q&A to get things going. And just briefly, we'll introduce our panelists of EV drivers. Why don't we start with Phyllis, if you don't mind, and maybe you could mention just a little bit about yourself, whether you live in a condo or apartment or a home or a single family home, maybe what kind of EV you drive and how long you've had it. So then we'll jump over to our next panelist after.
I'm an apartment dweller. I live on right by the East End School on North Street. So I've only had my car for about 3 months. It's a Bolt EUV, and I was able to get it because the city put a charging station right outside my window about a year ago. And that was when I decided to do it. And it's been extremely convenient for me in terms of the time I spent here in the city. I haven't done any long trips yet. So the thing that, well, I should probably mention, the one thing that I didn't think about ahead of time that I'm kind of watching is the impact of cold.
Hmm.
When the weather's cold, you can lose as much as 30% if I use the climate controls in the car.
Wow.
And so for driving around town, it hasn't mattered at all. But if I wanted to take a trip someplace, that's going to make a difference.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about that a bit more as we move
Very
on.
well, yeah.
So let's go next to Cindy. When you introduce yourself and a little bit about your car and how long you've had it.
Yeah, hi Troy. I live in a home with a detached garage, and when we built the garage a little more than 10 years ago, we put an EV charger, we put a level 2 charger in, excuse me, we put 220 into the garage, knowing that I wanted to put a level 2 charger in at some point. And then in 2014, so I've been driving EVs for almost 10 years. 2014, we leased our first EV, which was a BMW i3. And on a good day, had maybe 80 miles of range. And then I leased another i3 because I loved that quirky little car in 2017. And it had the range extender engine. So it had a gas powered engine and a 3-ish gallon tank and a slightly bigger battery. And so it could go maybe 150 miles, but you could keep filling up the gas. And then in 2020, when that lease ran out, I leased a Hyundai Kona, and I had that little car for 3 years, which was great and had about 250 miles of range. But of course, it was COVID, so we really weren't going anywhere. And then just this past summer, I leased my fourth EV. I never leased cars before this. By the way, I drive cars for 10 or 12 years, so this is kind of odd for us. But anyway, I did a bunch of test driving last summer, and I ended up choosing a Kia EV6, which gets about 275 miles on a charge on a good day. It charges very quickly. It does lose charge in the cold weather as well. And it's definitely a cushier car for me. It has lots of bells and whistles, but it's not super expensive anyway.
So yeah, so a long-term EV driver, very experienced. So, and let's move next to Aaron Farrell, our own Aaron from our team, who is a new EV driver.
So yeah, I'm Erin. I live in Portland. I'm also an apartment dweller, but I live in the Parkside neighborhood, and I purchased an EV in August of this past year. I purchased a used 2020 Nissan Leaf, which gets about 150-mile range, so definitely not 270. But we'll definitely go more into how that's been working and everything in our discussion, I think.
Great. So I think the next question I want to ask our panel is, what made you first consider getting an EV? Maybe we'll go back to Phyllis.
Well, my computer is giving me problems right at the moment, so hopefully I'll be able to stay with it. I thought I got it fixed yesterday, but I guess I didn't. So tell me the question again.
So what made you first consider getting an EV? Oh, 3 froze. Why don't we go to Cindy?
Oh, when the city put the okay.
Oh,
If I can get this fixed.
Okay, you're back. I think you're back. Oh, yes, you are. So yeah,
I'm back.
you're back.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. The city I was thinking about getting a new car because much as I loved my old car, I decided I needed some of the new safety features. So that was the driving force to getting a car. And just about the time I was thinking about doing it, this level 2 charging station went right outside my window. And I went, well, this is my chance. My son-in-law actually has a Bolt, but he doesn't ever go anywhere except work. So he hadn't really tested it. But it seemed like a good idea, and it was the smallest. I like small cars. It was the smallest, cheapest, and it comes with the supposedly 240-mile range. And so figured it was worth making the leap.
Great. All right. So actually, let's go to Aaron now, because I think Cindy might have more to talk about it being an experienced EV driver. So
yeah. So I work in the sustainability office. I obviously am supportive of the movement towards moving to electric transportation. So I was previously driving a 2007 Mazda that had been passed through the family, over 200 miles on it, and it sadly died over the summer. And I was in need of a new car very quickly. So I wasn't originally looking for an EV, but just in my search and also looking at the efficiency main rebates and finding the federal incentives, including a used EV tax credit, I realized that this might actually be a possibility for me. And so that just kind of opened the door to, allowing myself to even look in that direction. And so that's how I ended up, going towards the EV route. And yeah, I was very excited to be able to do it too.
Great, thanks. All right, so Cindy, you had your first EV in 2014, so what
Yeah,
was motivation?
well, I had a 10-year-old, Subaru, like most Mainers, and was getting ready for a new car, and I also do grant writing work in the energy and environmental space, and I was an environmental consultant for years, and I don't know, I just decided that this was one thing I could do, and I think there was a Leaf out at that time, and very, very expensive Teslas. And I can't remember what else was available, but I saw an article in the newspaper about this little BMW i3, and I don't know, I decided I had to have it. It was very weird. I'm not a car person and stuff, but my husband was a little perplexed, but we have a second car, we have a pickup truck that we could take on longer trips, and I work from home, and I just decided that, we're going to check this out. And one thing I will say is, once you start driving an EV, I doubt you'll ever go back to driving an ICE, internal combustion engine vehicle. It's just so smooth and easy, and not having to stop at gas stations and dealing with all of that. I don't know. I think that once you realize how easy and efficient and clean and low maintenance it is, very few people will go back unless they have a change in lifestyle where they really have to drive a lot of miles.
So you talk a little bit about, because you had that little BMW with short range, and you've transitioned to Konas and now the Kia. So like, talk about the differences you've seen in the technology between the early days and what you have now.
Well, definitely. I mean, the battery life is kind of amazing. That first BMW, I didn't really take on long trips. They have very skinny wheels. They stopped making them, but they were rear wheel drive, so it wasn't a very good car in the winter. But I did take it up to Augusta to an E2Tech meeting one time, and I had somebody in the car with me. This is the only time I ran out of charge. It was cold. I don't know what month it was, but it was, like 17 degrees. I was an idiot, to be honest. So I picked up this friend, and we were going up to that conference center that's just outside of Augusta, and they have a charger, and I thought, no problem. And I thought, well, even if my range, dips really badly, we can stop at the Hannaford right off the exit in Augusta, because there's a fast charger there. Well, I could not get the fast charger to work. The cell phone service in that area is very bad. Anyway, and I ended up having to get called and got towed, and it was unfortunate. But I learned my lesson. And so in terms of the cars, the batteries and also how quickly they charge. So we've taken our new car down to New York and New Jersey 3 times. We've got kids that live down there, and you take it to a level 3 charger outside of Hartford, and in 20 minutes you're from almost 10% charge to 80% charge. It's just amazing how fast, even faster than my Kona, which was just 4 years old, how much faster the fast charging goes.
So yeah, big change from the little BMW i3s to to the EV6s. Let's yeah, I remember riding with someone in one of those little BMWs and wondering if we were going to make it to Augusta or not. So,
Yeah, it's
really-
funny, a neighbor of mine just bought last summer bought a used one, and where my home office here sits, I look out onto the side street and I see him going up and down the street all the time. I don't know, I just love that quirky little car. So if they had done it with a bigger battery, I would have definitely hung on to it.
Yeah, those are great, but yeah, I am also an EV driver. I have a 2021 Hyundai Kona, and same. We drive it all over the place. We have a kiddo that goes to college in Western Vermont, and we are back and forth, all the time. So it's been comfortable to drive, and the range is enough to get us to Bennington, and so we've been pretty happy with it. So
I have found, you want to maximize, like when you're doing a longer trip, where you stop to do fast
Yeah.
charging. It needs to be someplace convenient, and you don't want to charge too soon, because then you might not get all the way to your destination without charging again, that kind of thing. So there's this bank of I think they're Electrify America chargers just north of Hartford at a Walmart, and
Yeah.
we've typically stopped there, and there's a lot of chargers, but it is a very busy place. And so when we went down for Thanksgiving, we decided not to take the EV, because I thought, A, it's going to be, really busy there, and B, it'll be colder. So between the traffic and the worrying about having to wait at the charger, we just opted not to. And we're going down there again next week, and I suspect because of the cold, maybe we'll just take the other car. But in general, no, it's been great.
yeah. So let's move to another question. So what's maybe go back to Phil. I mean, you've had a car for a little bit. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about your EV?
The most surprising thing, I think, besides the cold part, is the change in mindset that I've had to adjust to. I'm just so used to kind of not worrying about it. Okay, we're down to half a tank of gas. We should look around for a cheap gas station. And now it's like I watch that number go down, and I think, okay, if I just like what Cindy was just saying, if I mess up, I don't even know what I would do. So that sort of watching that number has been a really big mind shift for me, mindset shift. And I wasn't expecting that.
All right. How about you, Aaron?
I would say the same as what Phyllis just said. I think that, when I purchased the EV, I remember I calculated, I have 150 miles, and I do this one trip back and forth to Durham very frequently. So I looked up how many miles that was, and I decided, oh, I can do this, because it would be, I could do that trip this many times. But I realize now that the highway miles are a little bit different than, just driving on a normal road at lower speeds. Then again, also winter temperature brings down that mileage a bit. So that number of trips that I can do on one charge has been cut in half pretty much. So that's something that I definitely was surprised to learn, but also, it is just a mindset switch. So now I'm, considering when I'm going to charge. I'm also kind of considering, do I need to make that trip? Things like that. And I also would agree that with Cindy that since, having an EV and I've, had some challenges with it already, just with the mileage and things, I still wouldn't go, I would still hope to continue driving an EV. So it really is just changing my mindset on how I think about my trips, and just doing a little pre-planning that I didn't necessarily need to do before.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, we're a one vehicle family. We have one car in my family, and and it's the Kona. And so it does, for most day-to-day driving, super easy, never an issue. But for planning trips, you definitely be a little more strategic, because we don't have the option of taking a different car. We have to take our Kona, and so it's just a matter of making sure that you have an understanding of where the chargers are along the route. So, and then just planning that, when you get a couple 100 miles in the drive, you plan to have a cup of coffee or grab a bite to eat and charge the car. And Actually, I'm at a time where I would prefer to take a break after 4 or 5 hours of driving anyway, so it works out pretty well. So Cindy, how about you? What's one of the more surprising things you've learned about driving an EV?
Wow, it's been so long that it's kind of hard. I mean, I guess my thinking has definitely evolved because, you know, with my first and even the second car, if it got down to, 40 miles, I would plug it in at home at night. And now I find that I plug it in when it gets down to 100 miles, and it kind of cracks me up because, that it's a different mindset. And in terms of like driving a regular car, I went on a camping trip with some friends and took my husband's car, and I sort of forgot to put, like, all of a sudden I realized, oh, we need gas, like I had forgotten about that because I'm so used to sort of I charge at home, 95% of the time. So it's something I don't really think about. I think I was a little surprised, and I hadn't really put two and two together, that with a pure electric vehicle, like the maintenance is just non-existent. I mean, I would take my lease cars in once a year for some sort of check, and they'd rotate the tires, and that was about it. And even now I'm getting these emails from the Kia dealer saying, oh, it's time for a check. And I'll say, no, there's no, I don't need to take it in before a year and get a new inspection sticker. I mean, there really is, there's no oil change, there's no nothing. And actually it was kind of funny because when I did have that second BMW that had the range extender, as they called it, which it wasn't a true hybrid. It didn't recharge the battery. It flipped over to the gas engine actually for about, I don't know, 40 miles maybe. But it leaked. We had an oil leak in our garage. And it's like, whoever, we'd never had an oil, and it's like, I don't know, there was some seal or something and it was pretty new at the time. And my husband was kind of pissed, and I was like, yeah, figures, we have an oil leak and I'm driving essentially an EV. I never used the range extender. So I think the lack of maintenance is a really pleasant surprise.
Great. And I see Maureen has a question. When you go ahead, Maureen.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for sharing your experience so far. Since people are talking about planning your trips and where you stop and what that looks like, I'm curious if you could all speak to the resources you use to figure out where you're going to stop, what type of charging station and all of that. How you look it up.
You want to start, Erin?
Sure. I have been using the PlugShare app to plan out trips. It has a really good feature where you can, list, especially for like a longer trip. You can put in your starting and ending destination, and then it shows all the chargers. My Nissan Leaf only uses like the CHAdeMO fast charger plug, which is another thing I didn't know when I first bought the car, that not every fast charger has that plug. So I can set it up in the app to only show me fast chargers that have that plug. And so, yeah, I've been able to use that. I also typically only use level 2 chargers to charge my car because I live near one of the charging hubs, the neighborhood charging hubs. So I've typically been able to just charge overnight there, or, for a couple hours, and then pick it up and bring it back to my apartment. Yeah.
How about you, Phyllis? Have you experimented with any of the?
I've looked at the app. I have a friend in Connecticut that I need to visit. So I use mostly the EVgo app, but I have used PlugShare a little bit. And I did look, and PlugShare told me that there's a level 2 charger just a mile from her house at a little restaurant there. So I know when I visit them, I can charge my car while I'm there. But as far as actually using anything, I basically am just in this routine where I plug my car in during the day when I get home from someplace, and then before I go to bed, I go out and move it to my apartment parking lot. One day I did go down to the Hannaford just to test on the fast charger down there, and it was interesting how much more expensive it was. So I thought, well, that's something I need to think about. But I did get 50 kilowatts in like an hour, so or 50 miles in like an hour. So, well, so it's twice as fast as the level 2.
Yeah,
I'm interested to hear more about what Erin has to say when she said she got that huge charge. Apparently there's a level of charging that I don't know anything about.
you wanna,
And oh, my other concern is
Yeah.
when I was thinking about the cold weather, when I think about going to Hartford, I read all this stuff about before I leave home, I should plug my car in and let it warm up while it's plugged in for 20 minutes or whatever. And so trying to figure out how to do that with, I mean, at least it's right outside my window, but if when I do go to Connecticut, I'm thinking I need to figure out, go out early in the morning and plug my car in or something. So
So
I
that's-
have a lot of the technology that I haven't figured out yet.
so yeah, actually, before we jump on, maybe Will, can you talk about, is that something that we need to worry about? Like warming the car up or what, anything that we need, that an EV driver should consider before a long drive like that?
So most cars nowadays have all of that figured out for you. So you don't really have to think about it at all, which is great news. There is some extra energy requirements that go to preconditioning the batteries, especially if you're traveling in cold weather. And but most vehicles automatically maintain the battery temperature for optimum charging and for optimum use as well.
Great. So that's good news. So for a newer model EV, that's, so the battery management system will take care of those things, and we don't need to worry.
I have a question about that because
Yeah, go ahead.
I was mostly interested in maximizing the miles that I'm going to travel before I have to stop. And when we had that snowfall, I turned everything on while I was shoveling out the car just to see what happened. And just in that 5 minutes or so, I used an incredible amount of energy with the heat and everything on. So that's my question about that is trying to maximize how far I can go.
Yeah. Also, I'm not sure about your particular vehicle, but some vehicles give you the option to precondition the car while it's plugged in. So if that's an option, definitely go for that. Using the energy from your charger rather than from your battery will make sure that you have a full battery when you leave. And then as far as maximizing range goes, it's a tough question. I'm an EV driver as well. I drive 2015 e-Golf with a teeny tiny battery. And I can tell you, I have charged on a public charger maybe 10 times in the 2 years that I've owned the car. And I've only run it to empty from full, I think, twice. So I find that on, 99 out of 100 days, I don't actually care what my range is. I actually just use the car and plug it in when I get home and don't think about it. If you're interested in maximizing your range, you definitely want to do your best to reduce your auxiliary energy usage as much as possible. So doing things like turning the climate control off, using just the heated seats, putting on a jacket to keep yourself warm instead. And in the summer months, maybe rolling the windows down instead of running the air conditioning. And then driving conservatively, making sure if your car has regenerative braking option that you're using that and that you are gentle. So that you're allowing that regenerative braking to really capture as much of the energy as possible. And you're not flooring it everywhere you go because accelerating quickly requires a lot more energy than accelerating gently. The other thing that I would point out is 5 miles an hour on the highway is a lot. Going from 65 to 70 consumes a significant amount more energy. So doing the speed limit and meeting it will definitely help you get further on a single charge.
I was going to say that too. It makes a
Yeah.
huge difference, between 70 and 75, whatever. I found on my highway trips, my car gives me a readout of the kilowatt hours per mile. Is that the right metric?
Yeah.
And so, and so when I'm on a long trip, I kind of make sure that I'm trying to keep it at I think it's usually like 3.4 in good weather. And lately it's been down at 2.8 because it's cold and I'm driving around town and I'm not paying much attention. But if you can adjust your regenerative braking, I always have mine on pretty strong. for around town, but when you go to the highway, you kind of want to put that down a little bit so that the car doesn't hold back as much and you take advantage of the roll, so to
Mm.
speak. I'm not using the right terms because I'm not a car person, but that's that's for sure. And Phyllis, I would say I use the Plug Share app, and if you're going down to Connecticut, plan to stop in Massachusetts. There's, I think, the Salmon Pond Mall has a charger, and there's a couple of places around sort of that Worcester area that have great chargers, and then you can just go walk around the mall or whatever.
Cool. Actually, Gary's had his hand up for a bit, so let's go over to Gary. Oh, you're on mute, Gary.
Okay, a two-part question. First of all, what is the cost to have, so I live in a two-family home. What is the cost to install the charging system into a private home? And then number two, or the second part is, for example, when Cindy was talking about charging at the Hartford station, roughly what is the cost to charge your car when it's close to low or empty? Just talk a little bit about the costs associated with this.
So let's start with the
Thanks.
charging setup. So I don't know, Hogan, you want to, like, you guys do incentives. Do you have any sense of like you get what the cost is before the rebate, then after the rebate?
Sure, I can speak to that. So we offer rebates on the purchase of the vehicle, but not for the charging infrastructure, at least in residential homes. So that is a cost that you have to account for. But there are lots of charger options out there now, and I think that's brought the prices down. So the charging thing itself, I see prices generally in $500 to $1,000. I've heard chargers costing less than that too. And this is for kind of an at-home level 2 charger, we would call it. So a step up from the basic cord that comes with most vehicles. The piece that varies a lot from case to case is whether you need to make any electrical upgrades in your home. For electrical panel upgrades, there is a federal tax credit available, so that can help you if you need to make those upgrades. But it really just depends where the wiring exists in your home. And basically what you need is a dryer outlet. So it's a 240 volt outlet that you would plug this level 2 charger into. And if you already have that somewhere close to where your vehicle is going to be parked, then you might be all set and you just need the charger.
Right. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Will? Or
Yeah, I think the thing that's important to keep in mind is most vehicles are capable of what is referred to as level 1 charging. And level 1 charging is just plugging it in like you plug in your phone. Any old house outlet will do, as long as the wire is up to code, because it is going to be pulling the maximum current allowable on that circuit. That is the quickest and easiest solution, because chances are you've got an outlet on the outside of your house or somewhere in your garage that you can take advantage of. Opting to install level 2 charger does shorten your charging time by some fraction. It's usually about 2 to 1 in my experience, but remembering a couple of things here. First, the charging time is also dependent on how much charge you want to put on. So if you start your charge at 50% instead of at 20%, it's going to take less time to charge to 100. And secondly, for most people, we sleep for 8 hours a night. So you have an 8-hour charging window available, typically where your car isn't being used anyways, that you can take advantage of. So charging in 4 hours might not matter if you can get away with charging in 8. I have been charging on level 1 charging at my office here at work pretty much exclusively. And I find that, I plug it in when I get to work, and when I leave work, it's at 100%. So I don't really know how long it takes to charge, but I haven't had any need to install the higher power charger here.
right. And I mentioned we have one Hyundai Kona for our family. We often use the level 1 charger. My wife takes the car to Falmouth to work, which is not very far. So if we keep plugging into our level 1, we have an outlet right outside where we park the car. So we just plug in with a cable that came with the car. And just haven't seen the need to invest in a level 2 charger. It's like the level 1 has met our needs on day-to-day basis. And if I do need to charge up, sometimes I bring it to work and I can plug into the at the Elm Street garage. And so, so it really hasn't been a problem. Level 1 has really been working pretty well for us. But on trips, certainly we do need to use the fast chargers, and the pricing is a little variable. It really depends on the network and the individual charger. But I find that if I'm like going from a low charge up to about 80% on when I'm driving like back and forth to Vermont, it's like it can be around $20 to charge up. I find it to be less expensive than gas typically. So it hasn't really, and the level two charging is often really affordable. So if you at a public level 2 charger, it's not much at all. So really the only time you have to like make an investment is in fast charging again, and it's either less or comparable to filling up your tank with gasoline. So if you have a nice car. And then what I see, Eric has a question.
Can I just add, Troy?
Oh, yeah,
Sorry,
sure, Cindy. Yep.
especially since Phyllis is getting ready for a long trip. Will was talking about the time it takes to charge. And one thing that I knew, but I was sort of surprised, is that on those level 3 chargers, there's just so much electricity jamming through the car that to protect the batteries, once you get to 80% charge, the car limits how much power is coming in. So if you're on your way to Connecticut and you're stopping somewhere, you may not want to get it you may not want to wait to go from 80 to 90 to 100% charge and just stop at 80. And you may want to plan that in your trip because it takes a lot longer. Because the car slows it down so it doesn't blow the battery.
Definitely. That's really, I'm glad you mentioned that point, Cindy. That's after 80%, it takes unless you really, really need that extra range to get to your next charger.
Or if you're just having lunch or something and you have more time.
Right, but still, like there might be someone who wants to use that charger, and if you're just like, on a fast charger trickling in at 10 kilowatts because you're near, it's like it's just bad etiquette to hog the fast charger if you don't have to. So on that, but then go our next question over here. It's you have your hand up.
Are you you talking to me?
Yes, Eric, it's your
Okay, thanks.
turn.
Some of my questions are starting to get answered because for a while here, I'm new to this. I'm thinking about buying.
Oh, great.
And I'm completely, there's mostly stuff I don't know. So at first I was wondering, I was hearing these level 1, 2, and 3 chargers, which is like all mystery to me.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is at my home, if I've got just an ordinary outdoor outlet, that's going to be probably level 1. If I've got a dryer kind of level outlet that's 240 volt, that's something I can plug a level 2 into. It's going to charge faster. Level 3 is what, even faster fast charger that might be available in certain public locations?
Yep. Let's go to Will. Why don't you talk about charging?
But wait, I've got a question about charging. I don't have a garage, and I'm wondering if I need to install, say if I want to install a level 2 charger that I can charge my car at that sits in a driveway. Is it more difficult? Is it just as easy to install a charger that can be used for outdoor use versus indoor use? Is there a problem?
Okay.
Or is it more expensive?
All right. Will, you have any thoughts about those questions?
Yeah, I can give the rough overview of charging here. So the first thing to keep in mind is chargers come with what's called a power rating. And that power is measured in kilowatts typically, and it's reflective of the amount of energy that can be delivered in a given period of time. So if you charge at 1 kilowatt, you can gain 1 kilowatt hour of electricity in an hour. If you charge at 10, you can get 10 kilowatt hours, et cetera, et cetera. Level 1 chargers, as they're referred, typically are that the 120 volt, standard outlet. And they max out at around 1.5 kilowatts because that's the maximum rating that's allowed by National Fire Code for a given circuit. Level 2 chargers typically top out at around 9.5 kilowatts on average. There is some variance there depending on what the current capacity of that circuit is. Sometimes you can get a 40 amp or a 50 amp circuit instead of a 30 amp circuit installed, especially if you're investing in that infrastructure up front. And that will vary the power range that's available from that charger. And then level 3 charging is actually a different mode of charging called DC charging. It is commercial equipment. It's not something you can get in your home. You will have to take advantage of a public charger. And as a couple of other people have said, the charging rate varies based on a lot of different factors. So often the charging station will list a power rating, and that is typically the maximum power that is available from that station. That does not necessarily mean that you can charge at that rate. For instance, my vehicle, because it's old, I max out at 42 kilowatts. Doesn't matter if I'm connected to a 350 kilowatt charger. 42 is what the vehicle can take. 42 is what I get. And then in the same as everybody else, at that top 80 to 85% range, things slow down. They taper off as that battery gets full to make sure that the lifespan of the battery is preserved. Does that answer some of your questions?
Yes, the only other question I have is about an outdoor versus indoor if I don't have a garage.
Yeah. So outdoor chargers, you can buy an outdoor rated charger. My level 1 charger is outdoor rated. Most chargers they'll tell you if they're outdoor rated or indoor rated. And there might be some cost difference there. The other cost difference would be in the, physically getting the wires from point A to point B. Maybe it's easier in your case, depending on where your panel is located, to have a short run to an outlet that's close to your driveway. It's hard to know specifically without, actually getting an electrician in and saying, all right, your panel's here, it's going to be 10 feet of 20 gauge wire and you have to run it through 3 walls and drill concrete and all that. And then I think another thing that's worth sharing on the cost front, unfortunately, the cost of electricity is a very complicated and almost very political process in our current state.
What does your son do?
He says he sells clowns.
Oops.
Sorry,
Okay.
something just started playing.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So unfortunately, the price you pay per kilowatt hour being the energy equivalent, like gallons of gasoline, varies quite significantly. To give you some examples, at my house, I'm on this standard offer for CMP here in Portland. I pay on average about 24 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity, which means to charge my car, it costs me about $3 to $4 from 0 to full at my house. If I charge at the level 2 chargers downtown at the Spring Street lot, it's only 15 cents a kilowatt hour because Troy has worked out a great deal with EVgo, and it's quite inexpensive. So I actually prefer to charge there if I have to pay for charging because it's about 60% of the price. And then, of course, there are some free incentivized chargers available. LL Bean has free charging. I charge for free, quote unquote, here at my work. And then when it comes to DC fast charging, things get a lot more complicated. There's implementations for time of day. If the charger is busy, they might incentivize you to maybe not charge by making the price a little bit more expensive. They sometimes charge a parking or an idle fee on top of the energy fee. So there's a lot of other factors. I would say on average, I pay about 45 cents a kilowatt hour when I go to a fast charger. And I've done the math to equivalent that to, dollars per mile, which is really at the end of the day, what is the common metric between any car that you're trying to compare. And on average, it's about a third of the price of my gasoline equivalent car to drive my electric car. Considering that I do the majority of my charging either at home or at work, or on public level 2 chargers.
Does that answer
And-
your question, Eric?
So you're saying, Will, and I'm wondering how other people have found, if they've done any of the math, in terms of the comparison for driving a typical gasoline powered car versus driving an electric car. Is it typically, is Will's experience of saving 2/3, basically only paying 1/3 as much to charge it? Is that something that's comparable to what other people have found if they've done the math?
Why don't you try, Aaron? I know you're.
I was gonna say, I actually just did this last month. I added up everything that I spent on charging since I purchased the car in August. And I had spent $70 over 3 months on charging. And that's typically using a level 2 charger at one of the neighborhood charging hubs. The one that honestly Will just mentioned, which is the Spring and High Street lot. So yeah, and before that, I had a tank of a car and it was probably like more than that each month, probably. I don't know, maybe like 100, 150 per month in gas. So yeah, I saved a really good amount of money on charging.
And that's my experience as well, because I use my level 1 charger at home. I also have the benefit of 8 kilowatts of solar on my roof, so my charging at home is basically free. But again, no, that's not everybody's typical experience. But you know, again, using the level 2, because the only time I really have to pay anything to speak of is when we're on a road trip and having to use the fast chargers. But still, I find it to be less expensive than like the old, you know, filling up the gas tank. So, oh, go ahead, Phyllis.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done. I spend about $50 a month charging at the level 2 outside my window. And that's mostly driving around town, sometimes going to Sanford and back.
That would be compared to what might you have expected with a gasoline powered car for gas?
Well, I drove a Honda Fit, so it's a little cheaper, but not a lot, because the Honda Fit was, you know, 35 miles a gallon. So that depends on what you're moving from.
Yeah, Cindy, you still have an ICE car and you have an EV.
Yeah, we've never done the math. I don't know. I guess we're just lazy. You know, it's interesting talking about the level 1 and the level 2. When I got my first car, I just assumed I needed a level 2 charger. I have no idea why. Because I could be doing level 1 given the amount of you know, amount of miles that I travel in my general, when I'm not going on a trip. And that's another thing, is that when I first started driving electric, a lot of people would talk to me in parking lots and stuff. And the question I would ask them is, how many miles do you really drive in a day? Because I bet it's a lot less than you think. You know, if you're going from Gorham into Portland, just for example, I bet that the time, it seems like a lot of time because of traffic and everything, but it's not that many miles, right? And when people would go, oh yeah, I guess you're right, you know. But in terms of the cost, I only know that my husband has said that he sees a negligible change to our electric bill. We unfortunately have a house that doesn't face the right way for solar. It's a 100-year-old house. So and even though we have this beautiful sun coming in, and you know, I rarely pay to charge. Again, on a trip, I think it was $30 at a fast charger once this fall, but there may have been, you know, as Will said, like, you know, there may have been a little idle time or something there. And when you travel, sometimes there are free chargers places, like at this motel that we stay in New Jersey when we visit our kids. They have a level 2 charger outside that's free for guests. And so we, you know, it's often available and we can just plug in overnight and then, you know, we don't have to charge while we're there for the weekend. And then we just stop once and charge for $30 on the way home. But we haven't done the math. So I was interested to hear everybody else's math.
So one thing I did note is that all of our panelists and myself included, we have cars that are not Teslas. So I would note that the charging experience for Teslas is a bit different for non-Teslas. In fact, it's much easier. So there are the Tesla supercharge network is very robust. So if you are driving a Tesla, you can find fast charging fairly conveniently in most places without a lot of effort. And you also don't have to worry much about apps, because when you plug your Tesla into the supercharger it just takes care of everything for you. So it's a very simple process. So that's something to think about too. If that's that ease of not having to worry about all the apps and those details, Tesla is certainly something to consider if that charging experience is super important to you.
Although they
I just
are
realized that I
actually
do.
going to let people, other brand cars charge on their network, and maybe sometime this or next year. I'm sure they'll charge, the cost to those of us who don't drive Teslas will be exorbitant, but if you're in a pinch, it could be helpful.
Yeah, it could be, and it's not. I mean, and the Tesla driver is like, it's not necessarily free. At one time, I think it was free, but I don't believe it is now. I don't know, Will, if you have any more information about where that stands, or.
Yeah, there is a pretty big push on the residential side, consumer side of charging towards the North American Standard Connector, which will become SAJ 3100, I believe. And we'll see how that all plays out. Things are moving very fast. So who knows? Maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe not.
Yeah, we'll see. It does seem like it's taking a little longer than we might have thought, but I think it's safe to say that cars with the combo, the combo plug that most of our vehicles are using will still be supported. There may, even as the plug switch, there'll be adapters available, so that people with a car now won't be left high and dry. I'm not concerned about that personally. So I wouldn't, I like my Kona a lot, so for me, I might stick with it for a while longer, but I also am tempted to look at some newer models as well. Because one of the things, like my Kona maximum charge rate is 75 kilowatts. So a lot of newer cars can charge faster than that. But again, it hasn't really crimped my style having a 75 kilowatt speed. So I don't know, we'll see. But as we're getting close to time, so I want to wrap around.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I do have some concrete numbers I can offer since my car is new. It occurred to me that I've driven about 2,500 miles, and I can tell you that I've spent $190 charging at the level 2 station. And until I did the warm-up thing the other day, it was 4% of that was for climate control, and the rest of it was miles, and I'm getting 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour.
All right. That's great. That's good. That's a good number. So I want to go that round to our panel here and talk about basically, you've had your experience, different levels of experience with EVs. Do you regret your decision, and would you buy another one? So we'll start with Phil, really new EV owner.
Well, I think a lot depends on what you had before. And I
Yeah.
had my once in a lifetime new car before. It was a Honda Fit. It was the perfect car. So even though the Bolt is the smallest car I could find, it feels big to me. So most of the reasons I wouldn't have get this car are based on that. As far as the electrical part, I'm really liking it, and I'm looking forward to sort of trying it on some long distance things. It's been a very steep learning curve for me, and I still have a lot to learn, but I think over the long haul, I'm going to really like it.
Great. How about move to Aaron?
I also agree. I don't regret going the EV route. I think I probably would have spent a little bit more time thinking about how range would affect, my choice of which car I got. But I feel pretty lucky that this used EV was available. Otherwise, I probably would have ended up with a gas car. So I'm pretty happy with it, and I would definitely recommend, going the EV route if you're able to.
And Cindy?
Well, I already said that, once you go electric, you won't go back. And so a couple of things, if you're considering, I do think that there are a lot of really great used EVs with low mileage on them, especially because people like me are leasing them because we're worried about how much they're going to be worth after some number of years, and because the technology is changing so quickly. So I think used EVs are a really good deal. Also, if you're considering cars, I would say go out and test drive the cars. Don't expect the people at the dealerships to know a lot about them. I mean, I had this problem 14 years ago and it's not gotten any better. So be patient with them. One thing I did when I got my first i3, which I'm really like not a super Facebook person, but there are Facebook groups for all of these cars in national and international. And especially since the i3 was brand new when I bought it, it was the first one in Maine. There were not very many in the country. Questions about preconditioning and range and all of this stuff. You know, these Facebook groups can be really helpful. I know that sounds goofy, but because there's not there, especially back then, there wasn't a lot of local help. People are really, you know, supportive and helpful and will answer very specific questions. So I would say if you narrow down to a few cars and you're a Facebook person and you want to kind of see what the chatter is about the cars and pros and cons, go for it.
Yeah, and so I mentioned that we're in one car family with an EV, and I 100% would never go back to driving an internal combustion car. Like, if I find the driving experience to be so much better, there's no lag, it's quiet, it's peppy. So if I have to drive someone else's gas car, it's always feels like a big downgrade. So I am definitely a convert to EV driving and never going back. So yeah, and one thing I want to point out is we had our One Climate Future newsletter this month was full of tips and information about EVs. So if you are not a subscriber, I would recommend you go to oneclimatefuture.org and sign up for our newsletter. And so Aaron or Katie, as we have it available there for people want to,
Yeah,
if they didn't get it.
Yep, it's linked on the homepage, so you're able to read that recent newsletter.
So there's some more of those details that Will was talking about, the different types of charging and how the kilowatts versus kilowatt hours and how all that works. And we're always happy to answer questions. Hogan is at Efficiency Maine, happy to take your questions about incentives. And you can always email us with questions if you have them. And if we don't know, we'll talk to people like Will, who we greatly appreciate joining us this morning. And we're just after 10 o'clock. So again, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And we hope to see you at a future Coffee and Climate. And have a great day. Stay safe in the
You
store.
all.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.